All right, folks, welcome back to Mike and Maurice's Mind Escape. We have episode number 112 today, The Reality Revolution with Brian Scott. You can check out Brian's upcoming book and links to all of his stuff below. I have the links down below the video. And check us out at Patreon, patreon.com/Mike and Maurice. For $2 a month, you'll get some exclusive content and interviews. And check out our website, Mike and Maurice's mindescape.com. And if you're watching this right now, please hit the subscribe button with the bell notification. And if you're listening on iTunes or an audio platform, please give us a nice review. And what's going on, Brian? Thanks for coming back on.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, of course.
Doing great.
So last time we had you on, I when I was editing it for the audio, when I uploaded to all the audio platforms, I listened to it a little bit. I'm like, man, I sound really skeptical. And I tried to think about, because I kind of think about these things in terms of similar to what you do in some regard,
Right.
and some of the stuff you do on your channel. But I think what goes on in my mind when these things happen is I have to play advocate to whatever the other side is doing for whatever reason. So if we have somebody that's talking what some would consider woo-woo, I feel like I have to counter that, even though I believe in some of that stuff. And then on the other end of things, when somebody's so skeptical, I feel like I have to counterbalance that by bringing a little bit of the woo into it. So
I get that 100%. I appreciated your reluctance and skepticism. I think that we need that. A lot of times the discussion like that one, people are so quick to grasp onto it without questioning it. So,
oh yeah,
yeah, I get that. I'm very much like you. I'm the skeptic. I'm an old debater though, so I appreciate having the devil's advocate. So,
yeah, I mean, I wanted to point that out because I didn't want you to think that I was intentionally being adversarial, because that's not really my nature.
Don't worry about that.
But I do feel like our show is predicated on this fact of let's get all the information out there so people can decide whether this stuff is woo-woo to them, or if it's legit, or there's maybe some grain of truth in there. So
question everything.
Yeah. So I just
Right.
Again, I just wanted to point that out though before we get into this. But you have a new book coming out called Reality Revolution, which is also the name of your podcast and your channel and everything. Why don't you give us a little bit of the inspiration for the book, and then a little bit of a background of what's in the book? I just started reading it. You sent me a copy, so I've just started that yesterday.
It kind of outlines a spiritual journey for me. I had a crazy event happen, and I started to really question my own reality, my own sanity. I started to have some things happen. I thought, maybe I've gone insane or have some kind of post-traumatic stress disorder. And so I started studying and analyzing, physics, and found ways to explore parallel realities in a way that could enable or empower people to achieve their goals, find love, happiness, prosperity. And as a result, the purpose of the book is really to share what I had found and my journey, so that it could help other people out something similar. So it's I discussed everything from reality transurfing to law of attraction, and meditative techniques and exercises along that path. So
why don't you describe for people who are listening that don't know what it is? What is transurfing?
Yeah, well, this is a fun conversation, and if you haven't been exposed to it, it's something that you might find interesting. The mystery around it is also pretty interesting. But there's this book. It's one book. It's been gathered up as one book, and it's published by an obscure company called Reality Transurfing Steps 1 through 5. It's written by Vadim Zeland. He looks like a New Age Roy Orbison. When
Perfect.
Sure, I can picture that already.
Longer hair version. But he does an interview.
Okay.
You'll only see him in the corner with some sunglasses on. He doesn't want people to know who he is. Part of that is I think it works. The mystery of it. He's an old physicist, and he had written this book as a scientist. He wanted to describe reality creation as a scientist, moving along from a physicist perspective. If there is parallel realities, assuming that it's both either information or real, doesn't matter. Using this understanding of realities existing and the fact that the information of other parallel realities could exist, or in real terms or in information, can we use this as a way of maneuvering towards our goals faster and easier? He started experimenting with intention and actions, and really, if you were to sit down like a video gamer and game out what the law of attraction means, if thoughts become things, if thoughts create reality, then there's some other implications that a lot of these metaphysical teachers are not considering. He could add some stuff to the model of reality creation that makes it much more effective. Okay. For instance, if the three of us right now think the same thought, his model proposes the idea that it creates an energy entity, maybe conscious, maybe not. He says he doesn't know. He thinks possibly the larger they get somewhat conscious. But these energy entities, good example is politics. Everybody's thinking about this one thing. Everybody's talking about this one idea. It could be viruses. It could be whatever. It becomes this energy entity that even if you oppose it, you're giving its energy.
Sure.
And so we're walking like in this sea of pendulums that are pulling our energy and have their own intentions. Hey, why don't you come over and get a job with me? I want your energy, right? So he kind of talks about maneuvering through these energies that you're maneuvering through. And another really interesting aspect when you bring in physics, he brings in the idea of balancing forces. As for many people, if you really badly want something so bad, please, I want this so bad, you create these balancing forces. The opposite tends to happen.
Like in a negative way. So if you want it that bad, maybe
the worse that you want it. If you create a desire and put it up on a pedestal and say, I want this thing so bad, the opposite tends to come about. There's balancing forces. When you look at water, and water flows, it's going to naturally level out, right?
Right.
So the energies that we're talking about always are looking for balance. It's just the nature of nature. Always is looking for balance.
Sure.
And it's always looking for balance with thought energy as well. On some level, it's always looking for balance. There's always excess potential. When you stand on a ledge of a building, even though you have total control, there's excess potential if you take that next step that you're going to go down. So that excess potential energy is going to makes you step back from the ledge, right?
Right.
There's excess potential energies that are involved in how you're maneuvering through these realities that are also affected. He's bringing some other stuff into. And then he explores an idea in reality transurfing. It's a 900-page book, so I'm trying to summarize it.
Right.
And so it is right. So I'm trying to give you the big ones, but he explores an idea which is consistent with a lot of others of something called the space of variations, or this alternative space. And it's, if I walk outside my door, I have a million choices of things that can do, and there's an information field of all the consequences of each of those actions, right? And a lot of it, what he is arguing is that the heart, the subconscious heart, is connected to that information field, and so it knows a lot of what's happening. It doesn't communicate to you through words. You get feelings. Right. So it knows in the information field, if I go down the street, I might meet a business partner and might have a business. So if we connect our heart and mind, if I have a goal and my heart says, oh, that sounds great, I know of this whole sector in the information field that can guide you, and you start to follow your heart and mind, you maneuver through these energies, you see success. The big thing about transurfing is not the theory, is that there's a ton of people that have started to apply it. It's all about, okay, and he's saying the same. Don't believe me. This is not theory. I'm not making a philosophy for you. Go out and apply these techniques. And if they work, then you'll know it's true. The only way that you can prove this stuff is, and it's a scientific model. He's claiming, I'm not claiming anything mystical about religion or God. He's trying to take all that stuff and just say, okay, this is what we know. When I do A, B, and C, this happens. So one of the coolest techniques that comes out of transurfing that has really transformed my life. It's very simple, it's called the wave of fortune. Now, so let me explain this idea that maybe it'll resonate with you. You ever wake up and in the morning you have something just ridiculous happen? You stub your toe. You drop your coffee cup. It shatters on the floor. You got to clean all the coffee up.
Yeah.
Something bad happens, right? It's almost like you project out a wave of frustration and in that moment. It's a big emotional moment. Boom, this thought energy goes out. And then throughout the day, you have a preceding number of bad things happen. You ever have that bad day? You get in your car after you drop the coffee cup and there's a flat tire. You have a car accident. Somebody calls you, and it just like this preceding number. And why are they related? Maybe these energies are related. I don't know.
On the wrong side of the bed.
We have 5 or 6 things. Why does it always happen in strings? People out there are going to try to argue the science behind this. Go ahead, that's fine. But I promise you, whoever is listening has had that happen. You have one thing, and then it leads to like a snowball effect where you have all these things happen, right?
Right, like a big ball of negative energy, or
right. So you can wake up and create a wave of fortune. You choose something and you react the opposite of that dropped coffee. You go and pet your dog and it's like, oh my God, this is the greatest dog in the whole world. You just blast out something, this something wonderful is happening right now. You choose something to artificially create, right? And then you go through the day and you have these good things start happening to you. And you've had good days where you had a string of good things happen to you. But you don't go back and try to, you just accept it. Oh, it's just another thing that's randomly happened to me. It's, could it be related to the energy you put out earlier in the day? And it's not requiring a meditation. It's just try it out. It's the wave of fortune.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Yeah. And I mean, I don't think even scientists they wouldn't even entertain the idea at all. What they would say is this is just all randomness.
Random.
Yeah.
Right. He's saying that some of this can't be really,
I mean, I agree. I agree with that because I've had those kinds of things happen where they do come in waves. And I mean, even like death, when you look at like celebrities, usually if one celebrity dies up, you see 2 more the next day or 2,
So
it comes in.
Imagine walking around in this energy throughout the day. It seems like that you spread out this energy and then all these good things happen. You have some good thing, you have a great meal. So, you miss all the traffic on the way. It's the weirdest thing I've started to notice. He does get more complicated and really discusses synchronicity later in the book when he starts to go through the physics of it. Are synchronicities caused by us or do we walk into them? And he discusses the philosophy behind what that means. Another part of the model that's interesting to consider is, we always see like in these big traumatic events, like, 9/11, people didn't go into the building. Train accidents, people don't get on the train before it has an accident. They say, oh, I just got this feeling and it told me, right? So his argument is that the heart is connected to that information field and it knows in one reality that you were in that plane accident. Now, you may not be in a plane accident this time, but it knows. If you get that little tinge, like something tells you this doesn't feel right, it's literally because your heart is connected to an information field and it knows the 1,000 different parallel realities. They don't have to be real or not, but it knows in one of them, this plane crashes. So, once you start listening to your heart more, your heart, it may not, it's kind of a guidebook on how to listen to your heart when it's maneuvering through these space of variations.
Sure. So this would kind of play into maybe the many worlds theory, this idea that there's infinite universes that hold infinite,
right?
Or is that, I mean, how does the actual physics work with that? Is it just that
he tries to make the argument that It doesn't have to be the many worlds theory.
Okay.
It can be a number of different options. The many worlds theory would say that those realities are real, physical realities where I can touch stuff, and there's another version of me not in this conversation with you.
Right.
He's proposing that even if it's not real, there's an information space that we have access to that has all. We do know that there are future parallel realities because we have free will and choice, right? Whatever we do, there's going to be a number of physical consequences to that action.
Sure.
So and everything's going to play out according to that. If I bounce the basketball, it's going to bounce up in a certain way. It's just how it is, right?
Right.
So his argument is that we have access to this space of the future variations that are available, and that we can maneuver around these. I personally, as I talk about in the book, I had experienced, I had been working on these parallel realities. I had experienced a home invasion in my house.
Right.
Where somebody I woke up and somebody was there and with a gun at me, and then they pulled the trigger. I shut a porch door, and the bullet went through the glass, but it bounced off my back. It was a really traumatic, crazy moment. And then the following day, there was a bunch of different stuff around my environment. I don't know if they were reality shifts or not, but I had objects that I've never seen before in my house. I had friends calling me that had not talked to me, acting like they had been talking to me all the time. Building on the corner lot near my house it appears out of nowhere that looks old. It's not brand new. I've run across the lot before, but it's there. Mm-hmm. It's a physical building. Am I insane? My first thing is I'm concerned that maybe I had some kind of brain damage or I'm insane. So I try. Did I shift into another reality? Did I? There's the science fiction part of me that wants to believe that. So I'm aware of my bias. My bias is I want to believe. I'm a magical thinker. I believe in these parallel. I want to believe. And so, I'm aware of my bias, but I want to. My whole journey was not to disprove it; it was to prove it. So I am aware of my bias in that regard. But in the process, I've had, I think that there is a part of our subconscious or mind and our soul that protects us from major changes in realities. It doesn't want us to experience these things because it knows that we will go insane. And in my case, I would have died if I had not, in my own case, my conclusion was that I saw these changes because it was a life or death event. Mm-hmm. Like, I ended up and I'm just going to have to accept these unusual reality shifts. I'd found some other books where they talk about these same kind of things, the reality transurfing. Cynthia Sue Larson is a physicist that talks about quantum jumps and reality shifting. Bert Goldman, this guy, and I think he's in his 80s, wrote about jumping through parallel realities and his exploration of it. Has a great program on Mind Valley. And Frederick Dotson's book, Parallel Universes of Self, is a wonderful book that explores maneuvering through parallel realities, understanding these things. My book was my own exploration of these concepts of maneuvering through parallel realities in conjunction with the power of the mind and meditation, and how I can use these techniques and ideas to achieve goals. And can I become wealthy if I know that these parallel realities, and I know, can I use this to make money? Mm-hmm. Can I use this to get more subscribers on my YouTube channel? Can I use this to find love? Can I use this to improve my health?
Right.
I would theorize that the first time you went through a quantum jump was when you were a kid, and you bruised yourself, and your mom kissed it to make it better. And then, do you think that it instantly healed when you felt better, or do you think that you were jumping into a possibly another reality where you were already better? Our bodies, I believe, are maneuvering through multiple fields of reality that we are not aware of, and our understandings of reality are still coming together. And my proposal is that an aspect of it at least should consider that there is an information space of various realities that we're maneuvering through. Now, the interesting thing about reality transurfing, he's not as much talking about many worlds, but he is arguing timelines. So the timeline has its own makeup. So if do you remember a time when you were a kid when the food tasted better, when the colors were richer? There was a time when everything just seemed a little bit better. That timeline's still been going all along. And he argues that if you can find that same energy, that you move right back into that timeline. You just don't know it. And so we're maneuvering through different timelines. He also argues that we get induced and transitioned into timelines with terrible negative energies, particularly when we watch media that has traumatic events. It pulls us and sucks us into negative timelines that match other bad things that are happening. But it's something I could talk about forever. It's fascinating to me, and I'm still a student. Mm-hmm. Even after I've written this book, I'm still a student. I'm still learning. I'm still taking parts of this theory and throwing it out, and it's an ongoing thing.
No, I mean, it's definitely a fascinating topic. I think when you look at what you just described, there's a lot we don't know about
sure,
the external world. And for me personally, lately I feel like you could kind of go on and on forever with all sorts of external theories on what's out there, what does this all mean, the teleology, the study of purpose, and epistemology, what do we actually know, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But for me lately, I've been kind of thinking maybe it's time to start looking inward, because
yes.
I keep searching outward for answers, and it just keeps leading me around in different places, and things that and ideas and theories that were very romantic to me only a few months ago are now like, it is what it is. We're not going to be able to.
I get that, and that's my same journey too. I've been looking for stuff on the outside, and it is all. At least we can agree that everything that we are experience is just through consciousness. That's my biggest. Is everything is consciousness. Mm-hmm. No matter what is the reason behind it. We may not know the reasonings behind it, but we maneuver through this daily world, and it's all inside of us. It's not on the outside. And once we realize that, like you said, it's all inside of us. Consciousness is within. That's Neville Goddard's argument, who I believe was also in his own way talking about maneuvering through parallel realities with techniques that are very similar to these other ones. So,
yeah, you can look at a lot of ancient texts too. I mean, even the Bible says the kingdom of God is within. If you're looking,
right,
a lot of Eastern mysticism and Buddhism and all these things teach you to look inward. It's less about what's happening externally around you and more about kind of living in the present and kind of living a virtuous life, if you will. But my question is, let's get to Neville Goddard a little bit, because I don't know a ton about him. I've seen a couple of your videos, but why don't you explain who Neville Goddard is and his background and what some of his theories are?
Neville Goddard's very fascinating, and I started exploring him on my channel. He was a mystic, I guess you could call him. If you were to walk in the 60s and listen to him, you would think that he was just a Christian preacher. But when you start listening to it, he's not. And it's really amazing and interesting that this person was giving these speeches back in the 50s and 60s. He was an actor from Broadway, and he made the argument that we are all God. That's the fundamental. If I wanted to break everything else out, he's trying to argue that you are God, and that all of the characters in the Bible and Jesus Christ in the Bible, none of them are real. They're all states that we are experiencing in our life. And the Bible is a compilation of different states. And so you can get caught up of, this happened, this didn't. He's saying that doesn't matter. The Bible is not a historical document. The Bible is not a document outlining what happened. That doesn't matter. Somebody 3,000 years from now is not going to care about the history of what happened to Babylon, right? Mm-hmm. He's saying that this is a compilation of states, and that we are going through all of these states He has I think it's kind of like reincarnation. It gets a little bit unusual, but the idea is that we are going through these set of states that God came down to earth and then purposely forgot and put himself in all of us. God is in you. And the word Jesus Christ or God in when he mentions it in the Bible is just your human imagination. The concept and the idea is that God is your imagination. When you access your imagination, that's God. And so you don't necessarily have to believe that part of it, but that when he was talking to people in the 60s that were taught about the Bible in the 30s and 40s. And so their concept of God and reality creation is going to come from those very old fundamental concepts of the Bible. So one of the things that is when he was teaching this stuff, he was reaching to a certain audience that they're not going to let go of their concepts unless he talked about the Bible. But the really powerful thing, the reason that it's resonates and so popular on YouTube, Neville Goddard, is he's saying the same thing as reality transurfing. Don't believe me. You got to test this stuff out. You have to test this out. And if it works, then you know that what I'm saying is there's truth in it. And so he wrote his most famous book is The Feeling is the Secret. And I do talk about this on my channel and try to linking these ideas together. But when you focus on, it's kind of fundamentally hard. You want to own a private jet, right?
Mm-hmm. Who doesn't?
And so, but the hard thing is you don't know what that feels like. Like that's the why. Why doesn't everybody have a private jet? Because most people don't really know what that feels like. And when I say feeling, that means everything. That means that you already have a memory of buying the jet, that you've been through this process. When you're sitting in the jet, you know the feeling of sitting in the chair of the jet. You know the feeling of the pilot coming in and talking to you about the jet, right? Mm-hmm. And so Neville Goddard was this actor that was really good at creating states where he believed this reality was, even if it wasn't. And so he proposed if you can forget about your reality that you're in now and enter into a reality and then believe it and come from it, then you're going to see that reality in your life. And thousands of people have seen similar occurrences. Mm-hmm. The easiest one of his techniques to try, you don't need to believe all the biblical stuff, because I get that. And I say that on my program. Don't worry. I'll start citing Bible passages by reading one of his lectures. And people will flip it off. And that's how I was initially turned off by Neville Goddard, because I don't really want to sit. But if you go to bed tonight and you lay down in bed, and when you close your eyes, imagine you're not in your bed, right? Mm-hmm. Imagine that you're laying in a hotel room in Maui, right? And if you were to do this and feel the sheets and even imagine the palm trees outside and the temperature in the room, and that you get really good at it, feeling that bed that you're in, and even where's your house? Like imagine, when you're laying in bed, you have a direction in like a GPS, like my house is in Chicago, is in this direction, right? Right. If you just like let go, and the reason that people maybe not are successful because it's hard to let go of your reality, but while you go to sleep and then you let go and you imagine this, and if you do this on a regular basis, particularly the feeling part, then you're going to have some weird thing, a bridge of incidents occur. Next thing you know, you're going to be in Hawaii, right? You don't have to believe me. I'm telling people right now, try it, give it a shot. I have created meditations to help this, because sometimes the hard thing is for people is letting go of their current reality, right?
Sure.
That's why we're all stuck in whatever realities we are, because we absolutely take our environment around us. But that was what Neville Goddard was talking about. And so he was also an incredible wordsmith, Shakespearean in many ways, in the stories and things that he gave. And, sometimes I'm reading his stuff going, this is just mind blowing. Some of his lectures. And especially he had this, so the story is for Neville Goddard is that I think in the 30s, he meets this Ethiopian that had studied the Kabbalah. And there's another way to read the Bible when you read it in Hebrew, Each of the letters is a number.
Right.
So there's a way of reading the Bible that they would teach. As I interviewed Aaron Tomlinson, an expert on the Bible, they would teach this other way of reading the Bible numerically, but 1 to 2 people. It's pretty difficult to teach.
It's like Maurice's favorite movie, Pie.
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
Right. So Neville Goddard learned this technique of reading the Bible from Abdullah. And Abdullah taught this, it's called the law of assumption. Neville Goddard was never talking about the law of attraction. He never uses the word law of attraction. His idea was that the law of assumption. If you assume that something is happening now and real, then it will happen. Mm-hmm. That's his argument with the law of assumption. But he would use, he was quoting and treating the Bible using the Hebrew description. For instance, 40 days and 40 nights. I just read a lecture and he was describing how a completely different interpretation of 40 days and 40 nights by using the numerical interpretation. When you read Neville Goddard, he has the Bible memorized and will give you the exact part. He'll say Ephesians 4:4. But when you read, the interesting thing, I have another lecture, Israel Regardie was good friends with Neville Goddard. Israel, if you don't know who Israel Regardie, he was good friends with Aleister Crowley. And so when you read the essay on Neville Goddard, he had come from Rosicrucians. He had been a Rosicrucian. He studied the Kabbalah. There is something to his techniques. You will get out of it what you want. Is the best thing I can say. But if you were to simplify it, he was teaching that the imagination has power. The imagination is more than you think. And so let me give you this. Do you think that when you have an idea, some cool song that comes up for you, I know you like music. Do you think that just came up in your brain tissue? This idea that just popped up in neurons in your brain?
You're talking about, like, maybe I have a good idea and at that time there's a song that's familiar or that I like.
Or when you imagine something, when you create something, do you think that it's all just coming from your brain, or do you think our ideas come from outside?
Like, if I write a song, is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I'm just saying when you create anything, do you think it's just coming from?
Well, it comes obviously from the mind or from thought. Now, I mean, I could, I see what you're saying. Like, is it coming? Are you channeling? Is your
mind a conduit?
Not channeling, but yeah, are you taking in data from the universe and processing it in a certain way? I think that's a good question. I don't personally know. I know we're talking about realities and different realities. I'll say this. Since I have OCD, I know what it's like to live without OCD and what it's like to live with OCD. And OCD is like an ever-pervading or prevailing thought pattern that happens that you just have to keep kind of chipping away at. So for me, when I look at the most true thing I've ever read in terms of how to help yourself with anxiety and depression and this reality, this day-to-day consciousness kind of a thing, was The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle.
Absolutely.
And the way he describes everything, if you were to give that book to people with severe OCD or anxiety and depression and stuff like that, I think most people would come away saying this is true about how I think about these things or how I approach these things. So when you're talking about different realities, I think that there's something to that in regards of, like I said, I knew what it was like to have it and not have it, and not having it, when I was younger and a kid and my family was religious and stuff. You live in this reality where you think, oh, I'm going to be a good person, which I am, and when I get to be a certain age, I'm going to die, and when I die, I'm going to go to heaven. And that's your reality. Right. And I believed that as a kid, and obviously when you get older, you start to question things. But it's interesting to think about these different paradigms that we go through. Are we living in this one, like you said, bubble of a reality, and then slowly maybe we gain some sort of knowledge or have some sort of pivotal turning point, and then it switches to this whole other reality now? Right. So, like, I'm sure you've had this with the spiritual awakening or insights or paradigm shifts, and this is probably why you wrote your book, and obviously your incident that you had with the home invasion. Was there a difference, would you say, in your life before the home invasion and then after? or is that,
Pre-home invasion, I had gone through my awakening.
Okay.
So I was susceptible and aware of that stuff.
Okay.
But the question is, when you're daydreaming, if you imagine something cool happen, like, hey, you're going to move into this house, and your mind goes through a whole scenario, walking through the house with your kids, and, where is that coming from? And so Neville Goddard is arguing that is not, that's God.
Okay.
Like when you're imagining and daydreaming some scenario, and so all that plays out in your mind, it's not just neurons firing in your brain. That you're actually, that's God wants to create. God is here, and he's imagining, and that his argument fundamentally is that imagination is when we're connected to God. God wants us to use our imagination. When we use our imagination, there's power behind it. And so the argument, he takes it to the extreme, right? Like if I'm imagining for someone else, I can imagine for someone else. I can imagine someone else gets a new car, and then they'll get a new car. Neville Goddard says you gain even more power with your imagination when you start imagining for other people. And if you imagine for other people, because he's saying we're all God, so fundamentally he's saying we're all the one person that's split out. So if I imagine something bad for you, I'm imagining something bad for me.
Sure.
Right? Because you're me. So he's also making the argument. Try imagining for other people. You see somebody on the curb, you give them a dollar that hey, I need some money, but also imagine them, for a brief moment, getting a job or something like that, right? I've started to imagine for other people in a similar vein, and I've seen things happen. I've had somebody in my group say, I lost my suitcase, when I was at and I imagined and there's always a coincidence. You're always going to say, oh, that's not real. That's what Neville says. You'll have people always deny that whatever you imagined is not true, and that's fine. It doesn't matter, but we are. It's interesting to consider and explore these ideas, because the imagination is pretty amazing if it is just happening inside of our brain, inside of our body. I don't believe it is. I think it's non-local, and there might be more to it. Neville Goddard was talking in the 70s. The really interesting thing is, I would like to go and make a movie as an old screenwriter about Neville Goddard, because he's talking about astral travel, bilocating, seeing his family and thousands of miles away in the moment.
What time frame are we talking about? Like, when was all this happening?
He was really his speeches were 58 through 72.
Okay.
Most of them were 1958 through 72. But he was making the argument that he had a group of dreams. Like you read the earlier lectures and they're pretty inspiring. Hey, you can create your reality. And then something happens like 1969 or 70. And then he's saying he's had these dreams and events where he knows he knows for sure that he is God, and it's his responsibility to tell everybody about hey, you're God too, and it's going to happen for everybody. You're going to have this group of dreams that are going to awaken you to the fact that you are God, and then I don't have to go back and relive this life anymore. I'm just going to join back with God. That's when it gets a little bit weird with Neville Goddard. So, right. But it's as somebody just I'm reading it like a book. It's like a novel. As I read his lectures, they get more and more interesting. So,
I mean, that idea though isn't it's been around for a while, right? I mean, look at even like Gnosticism. This idea that there's one true God, that was this thing called forethought, which is interesting based on what we're talking about, and that from there, part of that forethought emanated without its counterpart, which was Sophia, and then Sophia created this inferior replication of God called Yaldabaoth, and then Yaldabaoth created us, which was some sort of flawed replication of some true divine realm. And then you look at, we talked about the Urantia papers a couple times.
Right.
Urantia papers talk about how we all have this one divine spark or piece of God within us. Right. A lot of religious texts talk about that too. So these ideas have been around for a while, but yeah, he's trying to take it in like the metaphysical direction where he's actually trying to explain maybe what's going on, like you mentioned,
Right.
With the which was it Vadim Zealander, is that, or Zeland?
Right. Now Zeland is making this Urantia
I was thinking for some reason I was thinking Zoolander when I see I said
Zeland is making the Urantia argument that we have a spark of God inside of us,
right?
Which is, he's saying that our heart is God. Imagine if God's just been hiding out in us with every beat of our heart. It's kind of a cool idea. It's like we're not God, but this little, but God's right there. And so if we can align with this God in our heart, then anything's possible. Which is interesting, because then you start to watch Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he's just trying to scientifically get the heart coherence with the brain, like looking at brain waves and heart at the same time. And once they are in sync, then we have greater power, and we see our goals accomplished. And so when you go to one of his conferences, it's all about heart-mind coherence. So there could be, I don't know if Neville Goddard's right or but there's something going on, and it's fun to explore this stuff. So yeah.
Oh, for sure. I mean, and here's the thing too, is like God. When we say God, I don't think we're not talking about some bearded Zeus concept. Archetype. Yeah, it's maybe some sort of energy or primordial force or something that we can't even fathom, and I think that that's where people get lost on this stuff, is they've been trained to hear God or Jesus or whatever, and then immediately think, oh, this is nonsense, because there was this narrative built around it where maybe it was geared towards more of the nonsense aspects of it, as opposed to looking at it for what it is, which is some sort of ancient truth or allegory or something along those lines, where you could still implement it into your life, but it doesn't mean that that there's a guy sitting on a throne on a cloud or something like that.
It's not some dude that's just listening to our every thoughts on a throne the whole time. But it is interesting when you hear Neville Goddard talk about Adam and Eve, like the serpent is us. The serpent is the Kundalini awakening in all of us. It's an interesting translation or concept of that allegory. Right. He's saying that the Genesis ends in the coffin in Egypt, which is God dying on purpose and becoming all of us to go through this process. I could see that. If I was God, it'd get boring after, a few trillion years. It'd be, you'd kind of want to, hey, I want to just forget that I'm God for a little while. I mean, it's only a little while. I'm going to go and live as many possible lives as I possibly can, good or bad, because I've lived infinitely, and it'll all come back eventually. I could see I get that, if I'm God,
see what they create.
Yeah, it's been boring. I've been doing this for a while. I've created planets and so I'd really like to live a life without knowing that I'm God for a little while. So
right. Well,
are you a proponent of the Urantia papers? Do you get into that stuff?
We talked about it. He's read it.
We talked about it. I don't know. When I read the Law of One, I think there's truth in both Urantia and Law of One. Law of One is saying that there may have been, with the Urantia papers, they may have had that they were written by people from the inner planes on Earth, and so they may have had their own agenda when in proposing this. It may be based on some truth, but based around an agenda of some kind. The same with the Law of One. I think there's truth in both of them, but the people in the inner planes or the spirits on the inner planes of the Earth may have had an agenda. I don't know. I don't know. That's the thing. When I'm reading parts of the Urantia, it's so well written, you can't deny it. Even if it's not true, it's like, damn, this is a good writer, and there's something.
Yeah, I know.
You just hit the nail on the head. Even if I don't look at these things anymore as if they're true or not true. I mean, you can look at a book that's a physical book that has an archaeological record and say, okay, this was written by somebody in this physical world. But these concepts and these ideas, I don't look at them anymore as if like the Bible's true or not, or this is true or not, because whether it's true or not, what you're reading, if it makes sense and has some sort of value to you, it doesn't matter. It doesn't.
It's really fun because the old science fiction part of me, to imagine the Urantia, all the different huge planets as they go, all these. That is so much fun to think about.
Well, visualizing,
it gets me so excited.
I do that all the time with anytime I have like a thought or like an idea or whatever. I always try and visualize it in my head. I'm just a visual person, though. In that sense, I learn better visually. I'm just very geared towards that stuff. I recommend a series on Gaia that is bringing the law of one. Initiation by Matthias De Stefano. Okay.
Dude is 21 years old, right? Mm-hmm. He says he's accessed the Akashic record and remembers past lives all the way to another planet, and is explaining how the universe came into being, and all the stuff that we're talking about is a part of it. I mean, he's explaining sacred geometries as a part of the way that the soul creates itself, and why planets are round and suns are round, and it all is fitting in to the Urantia and to the law of one idea. It's really interesting. So,
I mean, and my only other thing with that is, I think you have to, when you look at these things too, you're reading or listening or learning about somebody else's experience, which
every time
there may be truth in there, is my point, but it's truth to that person, whereas when you read it, you might have a different interpretation or a different visualization or some other thing. So ideas are kind of they vary from person to person, and I think that just because somebody describes something in a certain way or explains something in a certain way doesn't mean that that's going to be true for everybody. And to your point, point about everybody's God, I mean, I've talked about that before. I mean, that's what was the our purpose of life episode, or I forget what the title is called, but and I explained my theory of the purpose of life is to create music, to create other people, to
use your imagination.
And
right?
To that point, I talk about, if we are all God, that would make sense, because you want all of these different branches of individuality and creativity. Like you said, if everything's one, even to like the Eastern philosophy side of things, there's something probably very lucrative about there being all this variability in different branching out of different creativity, whether, like I said, art, music, whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. But I just have that part of me, and I can feel it with you guys. I just want to know. I want to know. I want somebody to.
Yeah, I mean, I accept it.
I want to know, man. Come on.
I don't think we will. I think I get these glimpses of like a moment of enlightenment or something like that, and then it's just a fleeting glimpse, and then it's just back into this reality. I've come to terms with the fact that I don't think I'll ever know, but I'm still going to try. And I think that's probably true for you and a lot of other people. So the process of it is fun. There's something depressing about it at times too. Like I said, I try and, in the beginning of the episode, I describe it, but I try and balance these things out, because I want to look at the hard science of it, because I want to know if there's any markers or indicators for these other concepts that are happening maybe out of our purview. That's what I'm trying to do. So I think sometimes when I get a little bit more skeptical, or I go on these couple week runs where we do episodes where, I feel a little bit like maybe
more science,
this is all there is, So
the book that I'm recommending that you read, that I know that will interest you, that it will get is The Case Against Reality by Donald Hoffman.
Okay.
So he is proposing that the mistake scientifically that we're making when we try to find the smallest, what's the smallest form? Is it an atom? Do we go to the electron? It's we're taking consciousness out of it. What is the smallest unit of consciousness? When we look at a rock or something like that, we want to look at the smallest unit of consciousness, and then imagine what the human body really is. It's just a very limited way of reading a small group of energies. We only think of our experience of living as, okay, our eyes see an energy, our ears detect the vibrations of an energy, we can smell an energy. We only have 5 senses, right? It's this tiny little, we're caught in this almost, imagine we're in a suit, and we have 5 energy detectors. We can taste it, we can smell it, we can hear it, we can see it. But there's so many other things going on, and we would not even be able to survive if we had access to all these others. We're limited on an evolutionary basis to these, on a matter of survival, to these small selected group, and ones that try to explore out of it don't survive. His argument, it's an evolutionary thing, but the reality that we're aware of is so limited, so small, just because of this small, even what we think. That book was eye-opening to me too, is that it's consciousness that we're looking at. It's consciousness that we're evaluating. And we're just really nothing more than an icon on a computer desk that runs a software program that really is receiving only a small amount of information.
Right. Well, I mean, even I think it was the Sir Roger Penrose episode with Joe Rogan, where he talks about how there's two on consciousness. There's 2 schools of thought within that kind of a community. More of the materialist academic types, they definitely think that consciousness is a byproduct of brain function. And then you've got some that do believe that particles itself, maybe photons, which are light particles, might be conscious too, and that's what we're experiencing, something along those lines. Or maybe the formation of some of these particles arrive at a certain formation where they create consciousness, something like that. So I do think, like you said, when you look at what do we know, what do we don't know, we talk about it all the time. We don't know it. We don't know shit.
Yeah.
And 100 years from now, we're going to be idiots. 200 years from now, and then 1,000 years from now, we're going to look like chimpanzees. So,
wouldn't it be cool though if we're moving up levels of consciousness, like we're in a classroom? This is just as we read Law of One and Neville Goddard. And wouldn't it be cool if the next level we move up to a higher level of being that has that can read minds and travel, and as we move up levels of consciousness, we inevitably become planets and stars and galaxies. All of it.
That sounds like some of the Rudolf Steiner stuff I was reading.
Right. Imagine that every star that becomes a black hole forms its own universe. And that was a living, conscious being that started as nothing more than a molecule and grew over time. And maybe every single one of us go over time when we start out and we become insects and animals. And that's just another cool thought that,
there are actually theories and actual scientists that have speculated maybe planets are consciousness because they all have unique characteristics that are specific to them. So like
that's
Earth,
the Law of One argument, is that the planets are conscious, right?
And that the Earth, but there's actual scientists that believe this too, that the Earth, our specific characteristic is the wobble, or the the fact that we experience precession of the equinox. These are super crazy things to think about for sure, and most people don't, but I do think that there's something important that can be gained from learning about these things and thinking about them. And it seems like even you so I would say that your thinking behind this is right to a certain extent. I'm definitely how do I want to say this? I believe that putting energy out in the world and getting it back in certain ways is not woo-woo at all. I think that's how the universe. That's how the universe works.
You can say it is, but that's just working to your detriment if you think that's woo-woo.
And you're a very positive person. And I look at some of the videos that you make. I know you do like guided meditation and stuff like that, but a lot of the other videos where you're interviewing people or you're talking about a specific person, you have a very positive and optimistic outlook on it. And I think that
I do.
And you look at, so I know a lot of YouTubers, I know a lot of other people that do podcasts. Your channel has probably grown faster than anybody besides somebody having some like cat video that blows up and you get 10 million followers the next day. But I would say that, this stuff definitely works. And I'm not saying that you haven't put in the work or done the research. You've definitely done all that. But the fact that this is you're manifesting your reality by thinking this way. So there's obviously something to that, in my opinion. And I think we all try and do that on certain levels in our life, but maybe some people aren't conscious of it.
Well, right now I'm on a little experiment with what we talked about. I call it the Wonderful 21. I have a meditation where something wonderful is happening to me now. It's like I have a meditation where I kind of repeat that in the morning, and then isn't it wonderful? Another meditation, and then a sleep meditation where something wonderful is happening to me now, and I'm just everything is wonderful all the time. Around every corner, I'm looking for something wonderful to happen. The people I meet that are wonderful. Wonderful has become like this energy. That's just an example. It's just one thing. What I'm telling people that are listening to this episode is that treat reality like it's a game and have fun with it, because you can create a really rich and wonderful reality. And it's so easy, especially now. Watch TV and let these fears overtake you. The government's bad. The politics are terrible. It's scary. There's wars. It's so easy to get sucked into this very negative reality. And how much does that really affect you? Accept your own attitude. And then when you start to accept that, you start to see it around every corner. Just like I said I was seeing the wonderful around every corner. You start to see the despair and sadness and sickness all around every corner. So the biggest thing, the hardest thing is that it's so easy to get stuck into what's going on in the world. It really is. And as a result, what you see going on around the world ends up happening in your life, because that's what you're focusing on all the time. And so instead of looking for what's wrong, start looking for what's wonderful. You know what I mean? It's a big thing. I'm not Mr. Positive my whole life. It took me to learn this. I used to be an alcoholic. I used to have incredible anxiety, still do sometimes, and fear, and all of that stuff would always make it worse. It always would make it worse, and so a lot of what I'm going through now is looking back and saying, okay, well, what was going on before is a result of this. So if I change the way I'm thinking and acting and the people that I hang around with, then my life will change. And I've seen that. I think that everybody has their own journey, and it's always going to be a little bit different. But I can only say that in my own life, I've been able to create things, not without somebody investing money in me or something. Just amazing, miraculous things have happened by a shift in my thinking. So
do you find is there a difference to you between imagining and praying?
I read a really cool, I've been reading some Edgar Cayce. Check out my episode on Edgar Cayce where he interprets the book of Revelations.
We love Cayce, so
Edgar Cayce is saying the book of Revelations is about opening your chakras.
Okay. Yeah, we've done some episodes on him and like his history, his background.
But he explains that there's meditation and there's prayer, and they're both different. Meditation is silence, going in and not thinking, that moment of silence, the letting go. And prayer is basically what we're talking about, manifesting. Prayer is not saying, oh, please do this for me, God. It's imagining the reality that you want. That is how he defines prayer. And that, to me, is my newest form of prayer. Neville Goddard is explaining what real prayer is. It's not, please, please, please do this for it. It's imagining that it's happening in the moment. That's my prayer.
Yeah.
That is the power of prayer, because that has true faith in it. That's me saying it's going to happen. It's happening now. And I'm feeling it as if it's happening, knowing that it's going to happen, but not even knowing it's happening now. That to me is prayer. And that once I started to see that, and I ask anybody else to try it.
To Maurice's point, though, I want to say, though, I think what most people think about as prayer is what you just said. Oh, please, God,
right, that
give me a new job, or please, God, do this for me or do that for me. So I think that even when you say the word prayer, that's what people think. If you're from a different culture, maybe there's less dogmatic thinking, behind it or whatever. But for the most part, that's what most people think.
I will still ask God verbally out loud for things, but it's different now than it used to be for me. Because
your intent's different, probably, right?
Well, I still will do it just in case. God, please,
Okay.
Hey, I need this. But I'm going to do it just in case.
Sure.
But I have felt like God has appreciated hey, God wants to answer my prayer, but I'm not being very specific. Oh, please help me. Okay, well, how can I help you? Imagine something for me, and I'll see what I can do. That's kind of my levels of prayer have gone to a point where God was pushing me to use my imagination in my prayer. And so my journey through prayer has been that. It has been because I've always prayed. We all have, but I've learned a lot about prayer from Neville Goddard.
Sure,
that's one. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, these topics are really fascinating to think about, and these are ones that are the good thing or the cool thing about this topic or these topics is that you can implement these in your life and actually see if they work or not. As where theorizing about the beginning of the universe or where this all comes from or where it's all going or whatever is just that. It's speculation, even on a
So here's one I want to talk to you about, maybe because you have a lot of knowledge, and I've asked almost all my interviews that are into reality transurfing. So after the reality transurfing book, Vadim Zeland writes a crazy book. You have to read it. It's unlike any book that you've ever read. I don't know what to make. Maybe it's channeled. He's not really claiming it's channeled. It's called Tufti the Priestess. And it's all written from the perspective of this Tufti the Priestess, a former priestess in the, and she's explaining that, we create our reality, that we're dreaming all the time, that we're dreaming when we dream, right? We're dreaming now. It's a different form of dream, but we're dreaming. And that it's very much like becoming lucid in our awaking state, becoming aware that most of the time, all the time, we're just following a script. Everything is a bunch of scripts. And there's a movie role that we're in. Right now, it's all going to come out. There's a movie role that we're following. Tufti the Priestess has this argument for something called the plate or plat. I don't know the correct pronunciation. I've done research and I've found references to the Bindu Chakra, but it's in the back of the head. Neville Goddard refers to the back of the head multiple times in his lectures. So it's interesting to see the synchronicity. But it's like imagine like in Avatar when they plug him in and there's a cord to the back of your head. He's saying that you feel it between your shoulders and your back. When you awaken this plat, we all have like this, it's like if somebody were to cut off your arm and you'd still feel it.
Sure.
And we have this imaginary part that's still, that he's saying, when you awaken it, then you add your visualizations into the plat. It's like you're loading up a new film in your reality. Sounds crazy. It sounds crazy. So, a bunch of people have started applying this and have started feeling it. They start feeling it now. That could be because their mind is able to create the sensation.
Sure.
But they've started adding. Have you ever heard of a reference of an energy point? Now, Carlos Castaneda talks about an assemblage point.
Right.
Which is where I think that Zeland is getting it from, talking about Tolle, Texas. Have you heard of anything like that?
So initially what you were describing sounded like Vedanta or Vedic philosophy when you were talking about what was going on. And then when you got to the chakra part, I actually don't know a ton about chakras personally. Right. It's not that
this is not a chakra, but it could be.
Right, but it's not even that I believe or don't believe in that. I just think that if you're talking about metaphysical things, then it's a metaphysical thing. When you start trying to implement them into materiality or the material world or the material realm, I have nothing against that, but I think that then you're in the realm of science, so then you have to take it for what it is, which is science, if that makes sense. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
But what you initially were describing did sound like the wake, the person you're always dreaming, that whole concept. Right. That's when you start talking about Eastern philosophy and like the waker and the sleeper, like all those different things, that's what that reminds me of. So there might be something to it. And a lot of that stuff probably came from the Vedas, I would imagine, because they're some of the most ancient
I think there is
texts.
something to it, or it wouldn't have continued so long.
Well, a a lot of transurfing is intention, the understanding of what intention is, choosing. But the key to understanding intention, Zeland says, is becoming lucid in your dreaming state. Looking at your hands, looking at a mirror, and then continuously asking yourself when you're awake, am I dreaming? And then when you enter into the state, you become aware that you're in a script, and then you can load up any script. Imagine if we are in a matrix and we're plugged in, and then we feel a artificial limb on the back of our head, and it's because we're sitting in a spaceship somewhere, and we're just going through a dream state while we are traveling from one solar system to another, right? I mean,
my head's about to explode.
Like right now we're on some interstellar starship traveling from one galaxy to another, and what we think right now is our reality is we're plugged in, right? And that's why if we focus on that particular area, we can upload a new software program or movie scene as we sit and dream in our eternal state of sleep while we're on this starship.
No, yeah, it's interesting when you break things down like that too, right? Like we're on this this giant, circular rock hurling through space at a rapid speed, and we're just like these particles that are formed with all these different other chemicals and hormones and all these things. And when you start to break it down, it's like we are basically living, breathing magic. The fact that we're here talking about this through this technology, and what we're made of, we're just particles vibrating at a certain frequency. It's just, when you break it down like that, it does sound like science fiction.
It is truly wonderful, though.
Yeah,
it is true.
And I think that's what's refreshing about channels like yours, and I'm excited to read more of your book and stuff like that. So I don't know what to think, and we could all be wrong right now. We could have no concept of what reality actually is. And I've thought
all we can do is test it.
Yeah.
All we can do that is what Zeland and Goddard are saying is, don't go by the theory of it. Experiment and test it and prove it for yourself. Take some of these techniques and ideas and try it out.
Right.
Try these meditations, try these techniques. All that we can do, we will never know the truth. All that we can do is test these things out. And when we see proof, then we have a better idea and we can continue to test. That's all that we can really ever do. We'll never know the truth.
One more question I have for you would be, do you think, as I mentioned, do you think that if you're going to implement these things, that you treat them for what they are, as this connection to the metaphysical? Because and I also mentioned that when you bring these concepts into reality and implement them, there's still no way of really quantifying. Yeah, you could say maybe you get results or something like that, but that's still there's no way to quantify that. Just like there's no way to quantify a mother's love for her child, or
you can't quantify love altogether.
Yeah, or matters of the heart or matters of the mind, things like that. There's no way to really quantify those in certain ways. So do you think that we approach these things and go to the metaphysical and treat it like that? Or do you think that maybe in the future there will be some way to quantify these theories in reality?
I think that we are moving towards a better understanding, maybe not proof, with quantum computing and advances in quantum physics, that we're going to understand some of these concepts. I do dedicate a chapter on quantum mechanics to see how they're trying. It's really hard for people to try some of these techniques and ideas without having that there's that doubter that's in all of us that's going to say, I need to know how this works. I'm that person too, I'm that person. Once I have some way of wrapping, okay, this is what's actually happening, even though it might not be, then these things start occurring better or more efficiently or faster. So there's that part of us that wants to understand, but we can still do these things without understanding. And that's when you read the Reality Transurfing book. I'm telling you, when you read this book, you're going to find It everybody that reads it is blown away. It's really well written and masterful. That's what he's arguing, is that we'll never know.
Mm-hmm.
We'll never know or have a way to truly test this stuff out. So he's taking it from a physicist, experimental, step-by-step basis. Okay, if this is how we act and this is what we do, and if these things come up, then you should have success. It is proven when you do these things that they are successful. And so what I'm looking at is what works. I know I want to have some concept to wrap my mind around, but I know that deep down I'll never truly understand it all.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm drawn to people like Vadim Zeland that will explain to me, this is kind of how it works. This is the physics behind it. We don't know for sure. It could be one or the other, but if you do these things, they will work. So,
I mean, yeah.
Does that make?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And science is the same way. Like I mentioned, what we know true today will be altered or changed in the future. So our idea of gravity today is going to probably be different than our idea of gravity hundreds of years or 1,000 years from now, just like it is.
We still don't really understand gravity.
Well,
That's the thing we don't.
Look at Newton's gravity, and then look at what we know now. Look at Einstein's theories, and then you say, okay, so then what's the next step? I mean, I think we had Brian Keating on, who was a physicist who was up for, or a cosmologist who was up for
he's amazing.
The Nobel Prize, his team. For a telescope and an experiment he designed, and that whole thing ended up not going the way that they needed it to go. They had to retract some of their stuff, but he was describing that gravity now is waves, and that they are like remnants of the Big Bang. They're probably the first signs of, and that's what they're looking for right now, is to prove that, as where I think gravity, gravitrons, that's what we think of, or that's what was thought of, is that they're these particles and they don't know exactly what was going on. So again, these are just scientific ideas that are evolving, just like other ideas, and there might be ways to quantify them in this realm, but it's hard to quantify something as metaphysical, some of the stuff that we're talking about. So
it's interesting when I think about the Big Bang. Sean Carroll's trying to argue that there is no Big Bang, but it's when I think about the Big Bang, the more I think about it as a thought. The law of one is around this idea the whole universe is around. It's like one thought exploded outward, and we see it. It looks like an explosion, but it's like what we're seeing is just this thought.
Right.
I don't know if that's true, but I recommend anybody that wants to. I have a Big Bang meditation where you can astrally travel to the Big Bang and put your wishes and desires into the Big Bang and let the universe work 13 trillion years to help you achieve whatever you want. That's fun.
Okay. Your guided meditation. Right? Sometimes I listen to them before I fall asleep, because I listen to either that or one of my favorite frequencies, which would be like 528 or 432, something along those lines. But check out Brian's guided meditations on his channel and his podcast, The Reality Revolution. Is there anything else you want to plug? When does your book come out?
March 31st.
And that'll be available on all platforms?
It should be available everywhere on all platforms. Okay. And I will, excited, I'll have a book on Audible. So actually.
Nice. Did you record the voice?
I did.
Nice.
They were going to have someone else record it. I was like, come on, give me a chance.
You can't do that. Yeah. You got a good voice. I like the tone of your
I've actually done some other books on the channel. So yeah.
Okay.
But, I'm excited to explore this stuff. It's exciting and fun. Ultimately, I want to help other people because I know that feeling of hopelessness. I know that feeling where I want to give up. If you read the book, there's a definite part of my life. My ex went with her first love, and I lost my kids, and I'm drinking heavily, and I have a pool in the backyard, and I want to jump in and not come out. And I know that feeling. I feel that, and I've been there. And this world is easily to lose all hope. And even if the stuff in my book is not real or scientifically true, I promise my goal is I want to use this stuff to help you out. And if you're out there and you think it's hopeless, It's not. You don't need, any money. I don't care where you live or what country that you're in. All it takes is a thought. And that single thought and a continuing procession of thoughts can change your life. And that is true. People are proving it every day. You don't even need to prove the science behind it. You can let go, and there are things that you can do to change your life. That to me is, I want to help people out because I've been there. I know that helplessness. I know it. And I don't care about selling the book. I care about getting the idea to people that wherever you're at, all hope is not lost. There are alternatives, and you can change your world. I don't care how hard it is or terrible it is. You can change your world and see real incredible change happen in your life if you go within and change the way you think. No, that's the biggest thing that I've learned.
Yeah, that's a amazing message, and I just want to point out the mind is a powerful thing. So it doesn't even matter if those things that you're talking about are true or not, because there's this thing called the placebo effect, and if you believe something enough and you start to manifest it, if you start to manifest it, other good things happen, and before you know it, you're off and running. And all it took was just kind of a change in thought pattern, kind of a thing.
What if everything? Let me propose an idea. What if everything is true? What if everything that we believe is true? What if everything is? There's no fiction. All the ideas have truth.
I think about that too. Yeah, that's.
And what if every single fictional novel that you read becomes real? I mean, somebody puts their human imagination. There's some planet where there's Star Trek's happening or Star Wars is happening. There's a battle between the Jedi and everything. What if everything is true?
Right.
Every single belief, even if they contradict. That's pretty cool to consider, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's.
And where do some of these crazy thoughts even come from? I mean, I think
where do they come from?
I think stuff all the time where I know I've never seen this place or experienced this thing or whatever.
Right.
So where did I get this idea, or how was I able to construct this in my mind? So, yeah, all this stuff's crazy. But well, let's wrap it up there.
I wanted to say, I think Edgar Allan Poe's that story about those guys that ate each other on the boat, that actually did become real.
It did. No, we're seeing examples. When we talked about the Wuhan virus earlier, what if that was created because the author wrote that? Frederick Dodson in my interview with him said...
the Dean Koontz passage?
Right, the Dean Koontz thing. Well, it's not a conspiracy. What if his imagination led to that? We see it all the time. Authors say all the time they have stuff they write happens. It doesn't necessarily have to be happening on this planet. But so what I say to people is take responsibility for what you imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Seriously. What you imagine, take responsibility for it. And imagine lovingly and good things. What if everything that's happening in the world, wars, you see, when we look back and talk about the Depression, people aren't talking about, that terrible time when the economy was really struggling. No, it's the Depression.
Right. It's a state of mind that everybody was in.
Right. When people look back on that lived through it, they don't say, it was just a struggle financially. No, it was a mental mindset that took over the entire world. Even Neville Goddard says what's happening in some country could just be the result of someone's imagination. And there's a really incredible lecture that I read that I recommend. Believe it in. When we talk about our country, the United States, Neville Goddard argues that we have this country because we believed it in. Mm-hmm. That if we take responsibility for our imagination and all the crazy stuff happening in the world, all of the different fights with different political parties, that's because our imagination is running rampant, and we're in a time, I personally believe, when what we imagine is becoming real faster. Mm-hmm. I really believe there's a reality revolution. That's where that comes from, the idea that what we are seeing, our thoughts come and become things faster. Well, maybe in the 60s, it would take a year for your thought to become real, and now it takes weeks, right?
Right.
And people are running rampant with crazy imaginations right now and not knowing their power. What if we're living in a time like X-Men where everybody's thoughts are becoming more real, and we're living in a rampant imagination where all this... So now that we know it, that is my thing, is take responsibility for what you're imagining. Let's imagine... even if it's not real, something incredible. We can come together and imagine peace and love for everybody. And what do we have to lose by doing it?
No,
right?
that's a great point. And we should all try and think along those lines. And I think you're right about the whole mob mindset kind of a thing in terms of you get enough people panicked or worried or focused on a certain topic. It magnifies the situation, but also if you look at like the internet and the ability to communicate with people across the world,
Absolutely.
communicate with people, tons of people at one time, put out a video, get 1 million views, whatever the case may be. The fact that that's even possible, I think, is connecting more people. So you do have more of this energy being funneled into certain ways, whether it be positive or negative or creating certain effects, if you will. So I think that that's possible. If you're talking about energy and putting it out in the world, I don't see why that would be any different.
And if a politician is evoking fear, he should take responsibility.
I mean, they all do, bro. So
they all
that's
do,
why we
right?
don't even. That's why we don't talk about politics on here. That was the whole point.
Right.
That's actually why we started the podcast. I'm like, I can now no longer look at Facebook, look at Twitter, look at any of these things, look at the TV or the news. I can't look at anything. It's so depressing. It's so divisive. Everybody's pissed off at each other. Yeah. I feel like I was just this like outsider, like an alien looking down, like what the fuck is going on here?
Me too. And then the discussion of pendulums was a big game changer for me. 2016, I'm the dude on Facebook that is going to try to argue with everybody. When they are wrong, I'm going to go on and say, no, you're wrong. This article, I was the dude that instantly responded.
I used to do that with sports that's what I used to do.
Right. Yeah. I put my energy, I gave my energy. And these are pendulums. They do not care about you. And if you fight it or if you support it, you're still giving your energy to it. Mm-hmm. Right? And it's energy that you can use to create, to imagine, to do all these things. So that was my big realization was it doesn't matter if I'm right. I'm giving my energy to it.
Imagine if all these people that were thinking along this binary thinking or this toxic thinking or whatever it may be. Imagine if they then took and created their own reality or their own creativity and did something good with that energy as opposed to so I get your point, and I think that that's a good way to look at it is like, let's think about positive things for other people. Let's create, and again, I'll go back to this idea that I think our sole purpose is to create. So instead of fighting about shit online, create a podcast, create a TV show, write a book, whatever, do something, put some sort of value out there into the world as opposed to just arguing with somebody.
So when am I going to interview you guys for your book? You're going to come on my show, right? You're going to be writing a book soon, right? Come on, man.
I actually have started. Well, I started writing one book on psychedelics, which I don't know how long that's going to take because it's a lot of research and stuff. And
I was there where you're at, and so just don't let that get you down.
I'm also working on an OCD book in my journey with OCD and paradigm shifts and stuff like that. So I am working on a couple things. I don't know how long it's going to take. It's probably going to take a little bit, but I mean, I definitely do need to put my thoughts out there, I think, and create some of this stuff. And I think I do have, I think I have something to offer people that have had terrible anxiety disorders and OCD, because it is OCD is like one of these helpless things where literally your mind is controlling you to think a certain way, which deep down not to be true, but you can't do anything about it because it's a
pattern of thinking.
It's a pattern of thought thinking. It's a compulsion. So I think that it's just like your mind gets in this big tangled, ball of wool or yarn or something like that, and you have to slowly start to like unravel. Have you ever like had a controller cord or something where you're sitting there for 20 minutes trying to?
Yeah. It could be to your advantage too. I've had friends that have OCD that have used it.
Oh, I do,
to get stuff done.
I do that.
You got to focus on something that's positive.
If you get OCD about something that's like a moneymaker for you,
right?
Then you're going to make more. So
right. Well,
that's one.
It's hard though, and I will say it's a daily struggle. And I mean, I do CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. That's been the biggest help for me.
Have you tried EFT with it?
I have tried EFT with a different therapist, and it didn't do any. Maybe I didn't do it enough or something. I don't know. I tried hypnotherapy that had some effect, but I don't know. Maybe I didn't do that one enough either. But
is it an energy when you have the OCD? Do you feel it in your body as an energy, or is it just a straight mental process?
It's an emotion. It's an emotional mind process.
Okay.
And what I would say though is that from doing CBT, I personally don't take medication. I'm not against it if it helps you. My world of thinking has always been whatever helps you be a better person mentally, whether it's you just being happy or being content, whatever the case may be. There's some people that are so bad or have it so bad that maybe they need the medication or the medication helps or whatever. I personally didn't react well with me. I'm not against it. I'm not one of these people that's like, oh, again, it's whatever works. For me, I found that the occasional macro dose of psilocybin was far more beneficial.
Yes.
And
yes, for OCD, it really is.
And that combined with the psychological standpoint, which would be the cognitive behavioral therapy, I think those two things hand to hand worked well, or has worked well for me so far. Again, it's whatever works for you. It's nice to have more options on the table. So when people talk about psychedelics and mental health, I'm a big advocate for it because I think why not have more tools in the drawer in case you need them or you want to try it, or maybe you're resistant to other types of therapies. So yeah, I think that I have a lot to offer as far as insight into this topic, and I see people struggling on forums and Facebook, and it's just tough to watch. And I know that I've been there myself, like as you mentioned with your issues that you've had with addiction and stuff like that. When you've experienced these things, I think, and you can come out of it, I think you do have something valid and tangible to offer to the world in terms of wisdom, or maybe even a couple points that somebody can take and run with, or inspiring somebody, or whatever the case may be. So, but yeah, I appreciate all of, your work and your positivity. And I think it makes me want to believe even more. Not that I don't, but, talking to you helps me, again, the pendulum thing, I was at the skeptical end of things, and now I'm swinging back over to the middle, or maybe towards the believer end of things. And I want to keep that going, and I think ultimately that'll lead towards something. But yeah, thank you for coming on. Check out Brian's book, The Reality Revolution. We've got the link down below. It'll be on all platforms. Check out his podcast and subscribe to his YouTube channel. Is there anything else you want to plug?
That's it. Thanks a lot. I always appreciate you guys.
Oh, for sure. We love having you on.
Yeah, anytime, man. Anytime.
And you can check us out at our website at www.mikeandmauricemindscape.com. We are on all podcast platforms. If you're listening on iTunes, please subscribe and leave us a nice review, if you will. And that's it. So thank you again.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Have a good one.
Peace.